Hey y'all, it's Colby R. Rice, and I am back again with another early morning write-in, which I don't know. I actually signed on. I hope you guys are well. I actually signed on yesterday, twice actually, once in the morning, once in the evening. And yesterday evening, I came on and I said, after like I kind of re-clarified a lot of things from the earlier morning session, I was like, let's get some writing done. And I may or may not come back for tomorrow, which was today. Not like I'm giving up on this live stream at all. It was just like I was tired and I felt like I needed like a break or what have you. And and then I was just like, I got up this morning and I was like, no, it's a habit. We're gonna make this a habit now. And I actually really enjoy live streaming, even though I'm mostly talking to myself. Some of you guys come and sign on and say hey, and I really appreciate that. And yeah, we're just gonna keep that going until I literally wake up and I'm just like, I really can't do this today, right? We're gonna keep going. All right. We're not calling it NaNoWriMo, but we're gonna come in with the spirit of NaNoWriMo that we're getting up and focusing on our craft every day. Okay. Having said that, I'm really loving, by the way, if you guys have an opportunity, you can't see the whole thing, but Anime Ape and some other sites really go hard with different types of cool lounge gear and stuff like that. And I am a Harry Potter fanatic. I'm actually rereading it right now. Actually, re-experiencing it because I read the first series all the way through, and now I'm listening and experiencing it on audiobook. And let me tell you something, Jim Dale, he really makes it do what it do. Okay. But in any case, as you can probably tell, I'm House Slytherin. I have a lot of Slytherin paraphernalia, and I'm going to keep collecting it. And for those of you who might not know me so well, you might be shocked that that's my house, but I'm not. And I'll just leave it at that. All right, let's jump into it. Because actually, I don't really have much of a lesson for today. I do have a lesson. Sorry, that I said that incorrectly. I do have a lesson for you. I don't have any established notes because I really want this to be more of like a brainstorming session. So I'm actually going to lead with the writing prompts today. We've done a whole lot of work since this started, like since day zero and on through. We have established so much of some of the critical information that we need to get our story up and running. And I'm sure at this point, if you've been doing the work, you have plenty of ideas that you've been jotting down, scene ideas, maybe bits of dialogue, maybe some, really sexy conflict on the macro, meso, and micro level. You have characters and their damages and their dysfunction. And of course, FYI, we're building critical histories for all of our characters, not just our main characters, because that makes our world a little bit richer and more like delicious. And so you have so many different elements of how to essentially put together a really amazing story. And just yesterday, we started talking about character arc, where we're sort of building out that journey, right? From beginning to end, from flawed to healed, from, wounded to, you know, healed. I guess I didn't want to repeat the word, but and so now you have all this information and it's time to write. Essentially, we should have been writing this entire time, which we have been doing. But this is where I really want you guys to start laying out the overall anatomy of your book. And that's why I entitled today's session Beginnings, Middles, and Ends. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about each part of the story and essentially what's supposed to be happening and how I think you could best jump into the development of the plot of your story by going about developing the beginnings, middles, and ends in a very specific way. And I guess I will take some notes here because that is something I want you guys to walk away with. But the notes are going to be kind of scant. All right. So beginnings, middles, and ends. Actually, and you know what I'm going to do here? Let me actually add in and oops. The art of the reveal. because that's really what I'm going to talk about with regard to how to get your beginning to its middle and how to get your middle to its end, right? So that's what it should really be entitled: Beginnings, Middles, and Ends, and the Art of the Reveal. Let's jump into it. Oh, wait, I just want to make sure you guys can see it. Okay, you can see it. Let me actually check on the sound and the audio. Like, hello. Okay, perfect. It's working on Instagram. Let's see what's going on YouTube. Okay, hello, hello. Yep, I think it's working. Okay, great. Sorry, team. Sometimes I do things a little bit backwards and that holds things up, but let's get back into it. All right, so I'm just going to put notes for the beginning, middle, and end. All right, my loves, my writing buddies. So before we even jump into developing a beginning, a middle, and an end, we have to figure out exactly what each of these things entails, right? I'm going to give you a very general overview of what goes in each one of these sections. And I'm going to be sort of vague right now because this is really the first day that we go hardcore on our plot development for our novels. Everything that we've done up until this point, including world building, the ideas, the character stuff, conflict, like those are important aspects of building out a plot. But literally from this day forward, we are focusing specifically on plot, plot, plot. So and again, this is not me telling you that you can't develop other aspects of your story. It's just in terms of where we are in our learning schedule, we are now talking about plot. And let me just go back to the learning schedule really quickly. I promised you guys that I would teach you 5 things this month. The first thing would be the concept development. We covered that on day 1. Okay. Then we did a lot of character development and a lot of conflict development. Okay. We had at least 1, 2, 3 of our half of this week has been on character development, and the other half of this week has been on conflict development. And we have put these things together, in fact, to create a really strong cast of characters and a strong conflict. But now we are officially in stage 4, where we are going to talk about how to systematically develop a plot, pretty much from the most general point to the most specific point. And I'm not going to talk about this too much on this live because I am developing a course called Plot Like a Badass, because I do have another brand. It's called The Bohemian Badass. I'll show you what it looks like at the end of this live. But at The Bohemian Badass, like that is the place where I do want to create a paywall for courses, really great courses like that you don't really find anywhere else. So I'm developing a Plot Like a Badass plotting course, badass character design course, badass world building. That's going to take a while. And then other sort of niche areas, like, for example, we don't really have any courses out there that teach you how to create metaphor. And that's something that I actually like am pretty good at. And so I have a mini course that I'm like redesigning called Metaphor Maven. So anyway, that's a whole side note. I'll talk about that like way later. But we are firmly in the plot development stage. And a lot of what I'm going to be teaching you is basically how I set up my plot, that like my system that I use. And the system that I use, I call the cake system. All right. Because you essentially pretty much layer your plot like a cake, but it's sort of like a reverse cake. And I'll explain to you why. All right, I'll explain to you why. So on Friday, which is today, we're doing beginning, middles, and ends, which is essentially like the second layer of the cake. And the way that we build plot cake or plot layer cake in my world and Colby's world is that we start from the smallest layer and the top, and then we build out all the way until the biggest layer at the bottom, right? With the first layer of plot for us is crafting the log line. And that's why I harped on that so much on the day that I was teaching it, because the log line is going to contain pretty much everything that we've done so far: the high concept, the world, the external conflict, the flawed character and critical history, internal conflict, and then how these things all come together to create a really compelling story. All of these things come together in the log line, in the blurb, right? So, in creating a really great, badass plot, the log line is the first, top, smallest part of the cake layer. And we've already built that. We did that on Wednesday, right? The next plot layer for me is comprised of three parts. It's the beginning, middle, and end layer, right? So we have the log line here, then the next layer is a little bit bigger, but we're only really focusing on developing three parts of that layer: beginning, middle, and end. As you'll see, we are going to then go through some other layers. So the next set of not the next set of layers, the next layer, let me get my words right. The next layer would be the 4-act structure. So we go from log line, which is 1, beginning, middle, and end, which is 3, the 4-act structure, act 1, 2A, 2B, and act 3, right? So as you can see on the calendar and on my fingers here, okay, we have act 1, we're learning tomorrow, act 2A is Sunday, act 2B, and then act 3 are on Monday and Tuesday, right? Then the next layer is comprised of 8 plot points. So we go from 1 to 3 to 4 to 8, because we are starting from the most general idea, and then we are tweaking and adding on. And not only are we adding on, we're sort of distilling and making more specific all the layers that come under it, right? It's easy for me to say, in the beginning, Luke Skywalker's home is destroyed, and that forces him on an adventure, into space. In the middle, Luke Skywalker has to start developing his know-how, get to know who he is. He goes on a lot of adventures, and one of these adventures is him joining the Resistance and saving the Princess Leia, right? And then the end is the final battle, okay? That's very general and very easy to put together. But then when we get to the 4-act structure, I'm going to actually ask you to be more specific about the 3 parts you had just developed the day before. And I'm going to give you a checklist, right? I'm going to say, hey, now we're going to treat the beginning as act 1, because that's what it is. And in act 1, the following types of things have to happen, right? In the middle that you just made yesterday, we actually divide that into 2 parts. This is what Act 2A is comprised of, and this is what you should be checking off on your 2A checklist, so on and so forth. So we start generally, and then we keep breaking down the elements of plot until we get even more specific. All right, so that is why I say pretty much from today all the way to the end of the month, essentially, it's all about plot, plot, plot. And we're starting with the essential second layer of our plot today by going into beginning, middle, and end. All right? Okay, I hope that made some kind of sense. But if it doesn't, it's okay. Again, I am making a course on this for the Bohemian Badass, and you'll get to experience it there if you don't quite follow it here. All right, so let's move forward and let's talk about beginnings, middles, and ends. And actually, child, I am not trying to go through this whole presentation. Let me skip to today's slide. All right, here we go. Okay, so in your typical beginning, and again, you're going to keep this very general, right? You're going to introduce the character. Oh, that's ugly. Hold on. Thank you. My goodness. You're going to introduce. Why is there every time? Sorry, y'all. I think there was like a mosquito or something. You're going to introduce the character, introduce the critical history, how is, well, not even how is, how does the character's life suck? Oh, right? What happens that gives the character a choice to either stay in his sucky, life or to do something new. Okay. Oh, we're also going to introduce for sci-fi and fantasy folks, introduce the world and context, right? Okay. All right. So here is a very simple, straightforward beginning structure, right? That you're going to want to pay attention to when you are creating the beginning of your story. I will even say that you can keep it even more general than what I have here. This is actually more getting to like the 4 act structure that we'll talk about, for the next 4 days starting tomorrow. But in case you just kind of like need a little bit of guidance, me just telling you, hey, just write, 50 words about the what happens in the beginning of your story, but you don't really have any reference points or anything like that. These are some of the questions or some of the things that you should be addressing in your beginning. And honestly, I would keep your beginning literally to no more than 50 words, right? Keep it super simple. I would actually even venture to tell you that you should use your log line, the log line structure that we talked about to create the paragraph describing your beginning. All right. Just some thoughts. Let's talk about the middle. And I'm going to keep this particular one super simple. Describe all the new experiences that I'm going to say the character has in their new world. Describe all the, I'm going to say, not even experiences, I'm going to call them adventures. Let's actually make the language consistent here because I am going to talk about creating the adventure in the story. But like, let's just be very clear about our vernacular. We're going to call every single challenge, every single new experience an adventure because that's essentially what we're treating it as. You're going to describe all the new adventures the character has in their new world. You're going to describe all the new knowledge that they gain in the new world. Actually, I don't have to keep writing that. Okay. All the new adventures, all the new knowledge, all describe, and you're also going to describe all the new hardships, and challenges that they face. And then this is also a great part where you can set up the social triggers. That's not even set up. You're going to introduce the social triggers that force the character to face, their critical history. And I'm also going to put here trauma. All right. And I think that's okay for now. I think that's enough to get you guys going, but it's also enough to it's not too much where I'm spoiling what's coming for the other layers of this plot cake. All right. And then we have the end. Oh, no. All right. The end basically should be you describing the final battle between the character, I'm going to put the MC, and the villain. Describe the final struggle between the MC and him or herself, right? And I'm going to put a sub note here. What parts of the critical history have the MC conquered, and what part remains? And of course, in answering this question, you're also going to have to, I think it's the most compelling when you leave the hardest, most insurmountable flaw and fear for the character to deal with in the end, right? Again, let's go with the Samwise Gamgee situation. In the beginning of the trilogy, he is soft, he's a sweet kid, funny, or sweet man. I guess he's a man, a grown man at that point. Shy, cowardly, a little bit naive, but also optimistic and a faithful friend, right? And one of the biggest traits, aside from the fact that he's a faithful friend, is that he is a little bit of a coward, and people do feel the need to sort of protect him. By the time we get to the end, oh, also, it's a cute little subplot. He has a lady, I think she owns the bar or whatever, the pub. I forget her name, Daisy Marcy or whatever, and he's really into her, but like he's shy. All right, we setting that up in the beginning. In the end, his final battle is to help Frodo get the ring to Mordor, or to throw it into the fires of Mordor. And we see that his cowardice is gone. He's braver than he's ever been. His loyalty and his friendship, his which is not a flaw, is actually what helped him to overcome his flaw of cowardice, right? And he's always been Frodo's conscience, right? That he's Frodo's Jiminy Cricket. But at the end, he is the one who essentially helps Frodo to destroy the ring. All right. And at the very end, when they're kind of like doing a little epilogue situation, when he comes back, he sees that woman that he's been feeling this whole time, and he goes for it. All right. He shoots his shot, and then you see them getting married. Okay. So that is essentially kind of what you want to think about when you're setting up the end, or you're summarizing very generally the end of your story. Let me actually put this on Do Not Disturb. 1 second, y'all. You want to talk about the ultimate final battle between the main character and the villain, basically the character against the actual external conflict. Okay. And then you need to address the final battle between said character and the internal conflict. Okay. This final struggle between the MC and himself. And then you also want to describe the new world after evil within and without is defeated. Okay. So these are essentially the main overarching general points you want to address when you're writing your summary for beginnings, middles, and ends today. But I also want to talk about the art of the reveal, because that's important. And this is something that actually needs its own standalone lesson, because in my opinion, there are several different types of reveals that can really turn the tides in your story and turn it into a different direction. Excuse me. But in general, a reveal, and let me actually stick it here. The reveal. And let me put it down here so you guys can see it. Hello. What's happening? Here we go. Generally, the reveal is I'm going to put, okay, is when a key secret is revealed, knowledge, is gained, and it raises the stakes. I'm going to put, and thus raises the stakes because that's important. Or the character's journey is, I'm going to say harshly. I won't say harshly because that's not necessarily true. The character's journey is interrupted or turned in a different direction. I'm going to say significantly. That is not how you spell significantly. Okay. So these situations generally are what going to determine, or these situations are what will determine how you get from the beginning to the middle to the end, right? Usually each one of these sections of your story is going to be connected by a reveal or an interruption, something significant, an event that happens that turns the story in a different direction, a secret that's revealed, a choice that is made based on revealed secrets or gained knowledge. The stakes are getting raised. The journey is interrupted or turned in a different direction with regard to an external trigger, right? That happens. So, for example, in whatchamacallit, The Last of Us, we have the beginning, which obviously sets up the world, sets up Joel as a character, sets up his damage and his wound. We see how his life sucks because he can't trust anyone, and we're also in this dystopian, unsafe world that's horrible. And then right at the end, something happens that gives him a choice to either stay in his life or do something new. But really, where the story gets even more interesting, the way that the story brings the external trigger and the internal conflict together is when not only is he tasked with shepherding this girl across the country, but she is the most important girl in the entire world. And her reveal, wherein she is immune to the cordyceps virus, right? Her reveal is what essentially connects the beginning to the middle, because that is what sets Joel and Tess really off on this adventure, or this dangerous adventure in the middle, where now they really do have to take up the goal of getting Ellie from Boston all the way to the Fireflies out in the middle of nowhere. And so that reveal is what connects the beginning to the middle. It's what propels us as the readers and as the watchers, and it's what propels the character from the first part of the story, the beginning, to the middle part. Then when Joel comes along, or not comes along, but then when he's bringing Ellie along, they have a whole bunch of adventures. Dangerous adventures, because it's really like a survival game, survival series, excuse me. And they meet a whole bunch of people. They are in a whole bunch of situations. They go from literally adventure to adventure. And as they're going on this adventure, it's actually Ellie who's gaining a lot of new knowledge as she learned, because she's never been outside of Boston ever, the dystopian version of Boston. And so, sort of through her, we're being introduced to this larger dystopian world and how things work. So she's learning about the different groups that, try to kill each other and hurt each other. She's learning about the cordyceps virus. She's learning about the different levels of cordyceps monsters, from the shamblers all the way to the, what are they called? Bloaters and beyond, right? So she's gaining new knowledge. They're having new experiences. They're also able to kind of explore and see how the whole world went to hell, because Ellie's never really been, again, farther than Boston. And then they're definitely going through a lot of hardships and different challenges. And this is also, as we mentioned yesterday, in the character arc, where a lot of the social triggers are forcing Joel to face himself, and they're also forcing Ellie to face herself. All right, so that's the middle. And then the reveal that propels them from the middle to the end is essentially when I would say that the end is actually relatively short. Like, it's really like the shortest part of the whole journey. But the reveal that really kicks us into Act 3 is when Joel is talking to, I forget the rebel leader's name. I'm sorry. But the rebel leader who asked him to bring her to the Fireflies has actually made it to the Fireflies before they did, right? So it's like, why didn't y'all just travel together? But I digress. But basically, he makes it over there with them, and he finds out, in order for them to harvest the cure for the cordyceps virus, that Ellie has to die, right? Because cordyceps, like the virus, even though she's immune, it grows all over the brain. And they show the CAT scan where they can see that the cordyceps has, in fact, integrated with Ellie's brain. And he realizes that the Fireflies, in trying to get a cure for the cordyceps virus, are going to end up killing Ellie. And so that is a massive reveal for him. And it's like revealing a key secret. He's gaining knowledge. The stakes are now raised, right? And the character's journey is turned in a totally different direction, because the people he thought were good and trying to be helpful are actually going to now take away the only thing that he's cared about, that Joel has cared about in a very, very long time, right? So the switch off from the middle to the end is actually quite abrupt, and the ending, like that end, the Act 3 of The Last of Us is fire, essentially. And just like with the game itself, the Act 3 in The Last of Us TV series also takes place essentially in one major episode, like the final episode. All right. So in that act, he has a final battle between the main character and the villain, who turns out to be the Fireflies themselves. He also is like facing the internal struggle between himself. Well, like, within himself, not between himself. But he's facing the struggle within himself, and facing these parts of critical history that he's been avoiding this whole time. He did not want to be vulnerable. Now he's super vulnerable. He didn't want to put his life on the line for somebody else. He's putting his life on the line for somebody else. He did not trust himself to take care of Ellie. Now he's going to really take care of Ellie by killing everybody. You know what I'm saying? So this is really where the again, like we said like we said yesterday, this is a mirror moment, and it's an opposite image of what we saw of Joel in the beginning. And then after that whole thing is done and Joel has done his work, we see what the new world looks like. Now, mind you, there's no new world for everybody else, but there is a new world for Joel and Ellie, because Joel is like, he's healed those inner parts of himself. He has stepped up into like the fatherly role for Ellie, and he protected her, as he promised, and he's really happy. The twist here, though, and this is something that you should think about as you're putting together an end, is that evil to a certain degree still endures. And for those of you who have played the second game and who know what's coming, Joel is eventually going to have to face his actions that he took in this first game. And Ellie, who, is grateful, I guess, to still be with Joel, she has misgivings about what really happened, because she was completely out cold while he was wrangling up the fireflies or whatever. And so when she finally awakens out of her anesthesia, or yeah, out of her anesthesia, she's not sure if she believes what Joel has told her. And, you know, plot twist, spoiler alert, he lied to Ellie. When she finally woke up, he lied to Ellie and said that there's a whole bunch of people who are immune, and that her blood, her body, her blood was never needed. And so now they left and they're going back to Wyoming, where Joel's brother is, and they're just gonna live happily ever after, and everything is good. And Ellie, of course, is just like, this don't really sound right. You know what I'm saying? And so she feels in her heart that something is not right. Okay. But temporarily, at least at the end of this first game, at the end of this first series, she accepts, or at least seems to accept, Joel's explanation. And you can see that while she feels uneasy about trusting what he tells her, that she's going to move on and live happily ever after with Joel as daughter and father. Right? So that is essentially how you flesh out a beginning, a middle, and the end. And the way that I just explained is how you use the reveal to connect the beginning and the middle, really to propel us from the beginning to the middle, and then to propel us from the middle to the end, right? So you should definitely try your best to add in between beginning and middle, one reveal here. Even if you don't really know exactly what the reveal is going to be, just give it a shot so that you have some kind of structure. And then connect the middle to the end with another reveal. Okay? Usually the major plot twist that propels the character into the final act. All right. I said to you guys that I didn't really have any notes, but apparently that was kind of a lie. So let's get into it then. All right. I just want to just remind you of what's happening before we jump into our writing session. I really have to get ahead of this because this has not been updated for a minute. Um, Want to remind you guys, our giveaways are still open. You can still earn extra entries. The more you share, the more entries you get. And there are some great giveaways. And then we have, of course, free books available for all of you through these 3 promos. We do have another promo coming up very soon. So pretty much as of Monday. So just bear with me. And once again, I did not update the book of the day, but I will show it to you. The book of the day is actually just one book. It's in the description, and it's really, in my opinion, one of the greatest books written of all time when it comes to planning out your plot. So let me just pull it up. And as it's being pulled up, I will tell you the name. The name is Coffee Break Screenwriter by Pilar Alessandra. And I love this book. Let me actually show it to you. Share this tab instead. Yeah, quick advertisement. This book is going to completely change your plotting method, and it's also going to remove all the excuses that we use as writers in order to like not write our books or our screenplay. Now, you notice it's called the Coffee Break Screenwriter, writing your script 10 minutes at a time. However, I think a lot of the same principles, pretty much all the principles, apply for you to you writing your own novel 10 minutes at a time. Okay, because the way she breaks down just the entire process, but also how to plot out your book or your story, rather, really only takes about 10 minutes a day. And she has a really wonderful interpretation of like the 4-act structure, the 8 sequence structure, right? And we'll get to the 8 plot points and the 8 sequences tomorrow, not tomorrow, but like in a few days or what have you. But it's actually from her that I got the idea that the 8 parts of your story are essentially 8 really awesome adventures, right? That really came from her. And so if you have the bandwidth, I do suggest that you invest in this particular book. I don't have it on the actual slide that I presented you because I forgot to update it, but I do have the link to this book in the book description. Sorry, the live description. And I actually want to show you just like the table of contents at the least. Okay, so that you know what you're getting. So she first takes you through brainstorming the story, right? And she goes through different ways of like basically different brainstorming perspectives, brainstorming from the point of emotion and character emotion and audience emotion, how to use character flaw to brainstorm the direction of your story, how to use premise to brainstorm the direction of your story. She takes you through all of these brainstorming activities to really help you think about the entirety of the world that you're developing. And you'll notice that certain things might coincide or overlap with what I taught you. That would make sense because this is one of the books, once again, that has been very formative in my foundation, my skills foundation as a writer. Then she goes into structure. And again, for those of you who are not super into screenwriting, that's cool. You can feel free to maybe skip over some of this. But if you're more so a novelist than a screenwriter, which I know a lot of you are, I would very much encourage you to check out the feature structure. The feature film is essentially a novel on screen. I know that for some screenwriters and directors, they might have just had heart attacks just now, just hearing me say that. But the story that a feature has to tell is the same story that your novel has to tell. So that's actually the closest structure to what you're trying to do if you're a novelist. TV pilots, slightly different structure. That's a whole different, live. But so you can skip over TV pilot if you want to. But I say that you should read it. All right. Then she tells you how to organize your story. She gives you a structure sheet, words. Let's get it together. Chapter 3 is all about creating the outline. And she has a great outlining method. Some of the outlining perspectives I definitely learned from her. Other outlining perspectives, like the whole like cake layer thing, that's something that like I've developed because like I just find it easier to start with a general idea and then get more and more specific. But it doesn't mean that I'm not using the tried and true principles of screenwriting. And so is Pilar Alessandra. Okay. Then she goes to character development. She goes to the first draft, dialogue, the rewrite, the craft, like how to do choreography for action, fight scenes, a final edit. And then if you're interested in pitching your materials and networking in the industry, she talks about presentation and opportunity. Again, this is specifically geared towards screenwriters and TV writers. However, ultimately, this is a book on how to tell a powerful cinematic story. And there are a lot of methods and perspectives in this book that I think will lend themselves wonderfully to your novel if you're a novelist. All right. So that's just one thing that I want to make pretty clear for you guys that you should be reading, in my opinion, relatively widely across different crafts in order to really become just a better storyteller, period. Video games themselves, a lot of people who are in narrative design and writing, they borrow a lot from cinematic screenwriting and TV writing. And they borrow a lot from character development that they've learned in novel writing and things of that nature. And this is not to say that all storytelling methods are the same. They're not, but they do overlap quite a bit, right? The difference for novelists really that I think that we could talk about more in the future is developing, especially if you're doing like first person or third person limited, developing a really rich inner life, because we can follow along with characters' thoughts a lot better and a lot more in a novel than we can with a screenplay or a teleplay, which are just basically show, don't tell, right? So screenwriting and TV writing are great for focusing your dialogue skills, your plotting skills, and the show aspect of the action. And that doesn't mean always like fighting, it just means like things that people are doing. Novels can be cinematic, but they're also better at helping us to understand the inner life of people, right? So every single medium has its sort of focus and strength, but a lot of the concepts do overlap. All right. Okay, my loves. So find that in the description along with everything else I was presenting to you. Let's move forward. Let's start writing. And of course, as per usual, I rambled, but I do hope that this was helpful for you at the same time, because I think that just getting through the material, I think is important so that you guys have a direction. So here are your writing prompts. All right. This is once again for all genres. So what we're going to notice in the next, pretty much over the rest of the month, is that I'm no longer going to break out your prompt by genre because, in my opinion, with the exception of romance, okay, and I'm not like a romance writer, so I don't pretend that I know everything about romance plotting. A lot of plots have a lot of the same components. All right. And so, what we're going to be doing and focusing on for, especially if you're dystopia, if you're sci-fi action, if you're fantasy, these prompts should actually hold up for all of those genres. And I would even say too that romance could follow this process a little bit more, but it does have its own structure. And I don't want to mislead you if you're doing fantasy romance to pay attention to this, but maybe take it with a grain of salt and like find other romance authors. Like J.A. Huss is a great course on writing and selling romance. It's an amazing course. You know what? I'll link her course, and it's free. It's on YouTube. I'll link her course in my description after this goes up. Because if you're a romance writer, I think this will teach you like hardcore plotting techniques, but you also need to learn like what the structure of an actual romance story is, even if it has fantasy elements. All right. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to reflect on all the work you've done so far. You have a lot of notes, I presume, if you've been following along. So take those notes and absorb them and really look at what scenes you're most excited to write. And you're going to jot them down as bullet points. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to design the beginning, right? We talked about what the beginning is, so I'm not going to go over it again. And then you're going to design the end. And that's one thing that I do want to say to you guys. When I'm doing the beginning, middle, end plot design, I start off with the beginning first, and then I do the end second. Because if I don't know what the ending of my story is, I have no idea what comes in the middle. And so I find this structure here, BEM, beginning, end, and middle, to be the best chronological way to develop your story, right? You already know where the character's starting off. We already know how to make great characters and how to make them kind of suck at life, right? And then we want to think about, and I think it's actually easier to think about, like, what is the opposite of what this character is going through? What is the ideal state of being for this character, right? What is their ideal happy ending? So it's easy to design like the messed up beginning and the amazing ending for the character, which is why I designed them back to back. But then once it's time to design the middle, you separate the beginning and the end, and you ask yourself, okay, in order to get from this messed up state to this ideal state, what has to happen in the middle? I think it's easier to design the middle once the end is designed. So that's why I put the writing prompts in this order. So do the reflection, just be excited, write down all the scenes you're the most excited to write about as bullet points. Design the beginning, and you can focus them around these questions here. All right. You're going to design the end around these questions here, and then you're going to design the middle. All right. That is your writing for the next 10 minutes. I'm probably going to come back on a little bit later tonight. You guys will probably be out like having fun and being normal human beings. I'm going to be here being a nerd and being a homebody. But in the meantime, I hope that you guys get some great spriting rinse. Wow, spriting rinse is crazy. I hope you get a great writing sprint in for the next 10 minutes. Holy cow, let's go. All right, my writing badasses, my writing loves, my writing compatriots. It is time for me to go. I got to go clock in, do what I have to do. And I hope that you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Have a great, happy, long weekend. I hope that you're getting a lot of writing done. And I really do hope that this series is helping you, at least to get your day started with the right mindset, that you're putting yourself and your self care and your creativity and your fun and your spirit first, because that's really what you need to be doing right now. Even if you have to go off and do a whole bunch of other things, like you are taking care of yourself first by starting off your day with writing. So having said that, don't forget all the amazing goodies in the description below. Invest in the book of the day and have a wonderful rest of your long weekend. Bye.